All right, good morning, beginning painting class. I'm going to go over how to do the proportions. You have the PDF in your Canvas. I've already uploaded it. It is 6 pages. You will want to follow along. I do not have a professional studio here for making YouTube videos or demonstration videos. It's going to be kind of messy. If you're watching this in the future, the far future, we are in a stay home for Nevada. So we are not in technical lockdown, but we are all isolating, social distancing, physical distancing, take your pick. So again, this is on the fly for the students right now, trying to get their work done today. So please forgive the quality of this video. I wish I had a document camera and an editing suite and the time to do it all. So apologies over. Let's move on. Okay, so you are working on your cover painting, and you're going to have to take a reproduction of what is probably a large painting or a medium-sized painting, bigger than what you're working on, more than likely, and you are going to have to fit it to your proportions. Now, the first thing is you can't just take any painting and then any canvas and start copying the original painting. The proportions are more than likely not going to match. You don't want to scrunch your figures or your composition to fit a smaller proportion or differently proportioned canvas. You want to keep everything the same proportion. So if a person's face is a certain width, you want to keep that width in scale. Does that make sense? You don't want to make a person who has a nice round face all of a sudden have a gaunt face because you have a canvas that is a different proportion than the original painting. So the first thing we're going to do is the no cropping method. This is simple math. Now this is assuming that you have, say, a piece of paper that you can cut down. If you're working with a fixed width canvas, like the ones we had you buy from the store, we're going to move on to the next section unless you're lucky and it's the correct proportions. But for now, we're going to pretend that you have control over the proportions of your surface. So paper is an easy example of that. So let's take an easy proportion for our original paper. Our original painting. We're going to start, and again, we're on page 1. So we're going to start with a 4-foot, there we go, backwards for me, 4-foot by 5-foot canvas. The little hash marks, if you have 1 hash mark, it means foot. If you have 2 hash marks, it means inches. So we are going to do a 4 by 5-foot painting. How do we get a smaller size that has the same proportions? We're going to create a ratio. So we're going to choose one of your dimensions, and we're going to write it out in the ratio format. We're going to line it up with the original. So for example, let's say we have a 4-foot by 5-foot painting. In the painting world, we say 4 by 5. We know 4 is the height, 5 is the width. So we'll write 4 over 5. If you're staying consistent, it doesn't really matter if it's 5 over 4. But in this case, we're going to do 4 over 5 because we're going to stay consistent and make sure that we're lining up height of the original with height of the version we're going to be making. So 4 by 5, I have a 20-inch canvas, 20-inch wide canvas. So I'm going to say 4 over 5 equals x over 20. I don't know what the height is. Well, I do my math. 5 times what is 20? Well, 5 times 4 is 20. So I just take the height of the original, which was 4, times that by 4 also, and I'll get 16. Lo and behold, a 4-foot by 5-foot painting has the same proportions as a 16-inch by 20-inch canvas. So 4 by 5 painting, really big, 4 feet by 5 feet, same proportions as a 16-inch by 20-inch canvas. So I can take that 4 by 5 painting and I can copy it onto my 16 by 20 painting and have everything look right. The scales will be different, vastly different, but it should still look like the original painting, right? And I'll scale everything down, my brush strokes, etc. So that's really easy. It's real math. you just want to make sure you're keeping your heights and your width consistent. So a 3x4 painting. A 3-foot by 4-foot painting is the same as a 6-inch by 8-inch painting. It's the same scale. It's the same proportions. The scale is different. 3 by 4 equals 6 by 8. 3 times 2 equals 6. 4 times 2 equals 8. If you go to page 2, I actually drew this out for you. There we go. And this shows the rectangular method. So this is kind of cool if you don't want to do a ton of math. There's my 3 by 4 down here. The largest rectangle is 6 by 8. I drew from one corner to the other, I drew a proportion diagonal. Ooh, it's so hard to do the camera backwards. How about if I move my hand here? All right, and then I go that way. How weird for me. There's my diagonal. If I measure anywhere on that diagonal and then from the bottom and then go out to the side or opposite, I will create a rectangle that is in the 3 by 4 ratio. So in your example, or the example I provided, we have a 3 by 4 and a 6 by 8. We know those are the same ratio. I also made a mark from this point, and it happened to be randomly, it was 5.25. I drew up to the diagonal and then over, backwards, and I got 7 inches. So that was 7 inches up to hit the diagonal. So a 5.25 and 7 up. So if I express that consistently, we have a 4/3 ratio. Consistently expressed, that is the same as a 7/5.25 ratio. So for example, if I had a 3-foot by 4-foot painting and I wanted to copy it, say, as a sketch, my sketch could be 5.25 by 7. Now, I'm not expressing that correctly because I want to do height by width. I should say I have a 4-foot by 3-foot painting. I would express that as a 7-inch by 5.25-inch drawing. Does that make sense to everybody? Hopefully so. I know this is confusing, but if you're following along, it should all make sense. Now we're getting to the cropping method. This is a little bit tougher, but it's not hard. If you take your time and think about it, read these instructions, you should be able to get it. A little bit more math, but not too much. Now, there's numerous methods to crop a painting. Why would you want to crop the painting, or why would you want to crop from the original that you're copying? Well, if you have a 5-foot by 7-foot painting, 5 vertical, 7 horizontal, and you have a 16 by 20-inch canvas, that's not the same proportions. 5 by 7 is not the same as 4 by 5. And I'm going to cover that with this example that I use here. So you're going to need to crop part of that original painting to get it to your canvas, because you do not want to scrunch things, right? That's not copying. It's making a gross, ugly composition. You want to keep it the way the original artist intended it, or they created it for you to, now you can copy. Use my words, Rihanna. All right. So what we're going to do is, first we're going to collect your dimensions and express them as a ratio, staying consistent with the height and width placement within the ratio. So for example, let's use a 16 by 20-inch canvas, which most of you have. I'm going to put the height at the top, 16 by 20. Width, we know that this is a landscape painting. Okay, 16 by 20. Let's say my original, I look at my book and the original, information says it's 45 inches by 55 inches. 45 height by 55 width. Again, landscape portrait, we're lining these up. My 16 by 20, if I simplify it, becomes a 4 by 5 ratio. If I take the 45 by 55 inch original painting and I simplify it, I get a 9 by 11 ratio. Whoa, 4 by 5 does not equal 9 by 11. I need to crop. If it happened to work out that 4 by 5 equaled 4 by 5, then I don't need to crop. But in this case, we know 45 inches by 55 inches is not going to be a 4 by 5 ratio. It's a 9 by 11, so I'm going to have to do some cropping. Now, in this method, we're going to do, don't, hey look, even on camera I hit puberty when I'm giving my demos. In this method, okay, so in this method we're going to worry about our composition first and then math, because we want to make a pleasing composition. So I want to get as much of this information. This is a painting by Claude Monet, 1869. And it's a person holding a water pitcher, and a little child grabbing the water pitcher, and a cat flying in for the attack. Okay, so before I worry about math, my proportions, I just want to get as much of this image as I can, knowing that I'm going to have to delete some of it. So I look at it and I go, you know, this is not a good crop. I'm cutting off the top of her head, this person's head. I'm cutting off the child's head. The focus seems to be on the area here, not the picture down here. And we don't have anything but a little piece of the cat. Nobody would know what that is. So over here, I'm sort of saying, well, if I'm going to make it a little bit smaller, I can crop out this kind of information on the sides and still have a good composition. Get as much of that information as possible. It's not bad. It still retains the original feel of, or the feel of the original composition up here. All right. Once I have that crop kind of sketched out, I'm going to try to work with even numbers. So you see here an example of an even or round number, 5 inches. Easy to work with. 5 1/4 inches. Not bad. That's 5.25. We can work with 5.25 if we need to. 5 3/32. Why? Don't do that. 3 divided by 30 seconds makes 3 divided by 32 makes a really long decimal. You don't want to get into that kind of ratio stuff. Round it up. Just tighten up your measurement to an even number, 5 or quarter, half inch, 3/4 inch. If you're good at math, which hopefully most of you are, you're in college by now, 1/8 even, I'd probably stay away from the 16ths. But we're gonna try to just keep a nice round number here. All right, so I look at my most important dimension, and for me the most important dimension is getting that cat in, getting this person in, and getting this child in. So I've got a line drawn there that gets all that in. It crops off a little bit on the bottom, and we'll see how much it crops off the sides later. So I look at that and I say, okay, I measure it, and it winds up to be round. I make it 2 inches. So there's a 2-inch line. Not bad. Well, if my canvas is 4 by 5, 4:5 ratio, and 2 is my vertical this time, 4 divided by what equals 2? That's easy. Divided by 2 equals 2. So 5 then divided by 2 equals 2.5, because we got to keep our proportions, our ratios intact. So I do the same thing that I did up here. 4 divided by 2 equals my 2. Well, then I just take 5 and I divide it by 2, 2.5. That's going to be my width. So I will then make a, oh my goodness, it's still on my scanner because I just finished making your document. I'm back. I measure out 2.5 inches. Back up. 2 by 2.5 is the same as 4 by 5, which is the same as 16 by 20. That's how I get my crop. I'm going to ignore all this information to the side. Beautiful. And that's the painting I'm now going to cover for my project. Now, let's say you did that with a nice round number, but you felt there was still a better composition lurking in there. You wanted to tighten it up. What I would do is just do the diagonal method right there, and then find the nice round number similar somewhere where you want it, towards where you want to crop, and you can just measure it out from there, or do the math with your ratios. You know how to do that. And then you might say, well, that's 1.75, and if it is, then you measure out what that is, or you do the math, and you'll have what your width is, and it'll still retain that 4 by 5 ratio. That's the most important thing about doing this prep work, is getting, before you start drawing, before you start doing your value studies, you got to get the ratio and the composition correct. It's easiest if you have tracing paper. If we were back in the studio, I would have handed out to you some tracing paper. So what you're going to have to do is use any method you can to kind of measure over your drawing. If you have it on the internet, from the internet, download it, print it out. Use a tool like Photoshop to crop it, which is actually really easy if you have access to Photoshop. Anything you can do, draw on your monitor. I mean, obviously, if you're working from a phone or a tablet, anything you do. We're in tough times right now. We are being scrappy. Here I am giving a pretty raw demo. We are artists. We face challenges all the time. We're going to make this stuff work. If you are still watching, I'll be in chat during our